What is up, everyone? So it's been a bit of time since I've last done a video on books and literature, so I thought I might as well give you one for the time being. And I decided, you know what, it's been enough time since I've last done a update to my top 10 books of all time. It has changed a little bit, so I thought I might as well fill you guys in on those changes. I've been a bit busy writing my own books, reading some new ones, but as of right now, this is how the list currently stands. There's been some changes, some books that are still pretty high on the list. And just to reiterate, just to clear up some things, this isn't a personal favorite list. It's not my favorite books ever written. This is purely from like a quality and craft standpoint, like a critical sense. Like some books on this list are amongst my favorite of all time, and as much as I want to rank them high, I do think some other books, though I might not love them as much, do rank higher. They are better, even if I might not love them nearly as much as these other ones. But yeah, purely from a critical sense, these are the best books I have ever read. And yeah, it's been enough time since that top 20 video I did a bit back, and there's been some changes, some books that I've kind of restructured on this list. I've definitely restructured this quite a bit. And then I'm doing this video in one take since I want to save some time for editing. So there's going to be a few slip-ups. There might be some stuttering and a loss for words because I'm doing this all off the top of my head. I don't have a script for this, so I'm just going to be kind of rambling. But you know what? That's better than nothing, since you guys have probably been, well, a few of you that actually watched these literature videos have probably been waiting for me to do another one. So I might as well get started with number 10. This one is, if you don't know me, I am a big Sanderson fan, and Words of Radiance is his magnum opus, the best sequel I have ever read. Way of Kings was an absolute masterpiece. I loved it. Amazing setup, but this book takes everything that it sets up. Everything. The interesting world, the characters, the war, and it expands on it near flawlessly. It continues it. This is everything a sequel, at least a fantasy sequel, should be. It introduces new internal conflicts and external ones for Kaladin, and especially for Shallan, who I wasn't quite as interested in the first book, but in this one, she is so interesting. Obviously not as good as my boy Kaladin, but come on, who's possibly got top Kaladin? Closest that anyone's ever come is probably Dalinar in Oathspring, which is also a banger-ass book. And Rhythm of War is great, but not as good as the other three. And then I'm yet to read Wind and Truth because I've heard some less than amazing things about that book. But who knows? Maybe it could be subverted. But I doubt any other book in the series moving forward, or at least how the series currently is, can possibly top Words of Radiance as Sanderson's magnum opus. Obviously, it's got the Sanderlanche. It sets up so many things, foreshadows so many things, and then the most insane climax and just avalanche of things just falling into place, things making sense, things happening. It is so just, one of the best fantasy novels I've ever read, and it stands toe-to-toe with even classic books, which there are a lot of them on this list. But yeah, I was staggered by this one, and even for a time, I called this the best novel I've ever read. I actually thought this was the best book I had ever read. And it's still top 10, but these ones just got even better for me. Speaking of, number 9 is, if you don't know me, one of my top 3, if not my number 1 favorite novel ever written, Blood Meridian. If you don't know, I'm actually directing an adaptation for this book, an animated one, and due to legal copyright stuff, I might have to fragment it into episodes, but we'll see where that goes. But yeah, Blood Meridian is, what else can I say that hasn't been said before about this book? One of the darkest, brutal, and most unrelenting novels ever written. The most, second best Western ever written. We'll get to the number 1 soon. It is one of the most iconic American books ever, and it is deeply unique in its prose. It completely rejects the standard expectations and structures for how a book should be written. No quotations, simple prose, and yet it works staggeringly well. It adds an air of uniqueness of eeriness to how all of this is conveyed to us. And of course, the crown jewel of this book, Judge Holden, my favorite villain in all of fiction, an intimidating, vile, and deeply intriguing, not in a good way, but deeply just hypnotic character. His philosophies are so sickening, yet it is still so hard to take your attention away when he's monologuing, when he's explaining his philosophies. And that's on top of so much of the memorable, brutal, and violent scenes. This is not for the faint of heart. Someone's texting me. I'll save that for after. This is not for the faint of heart. This is one of the most violent books ever written, and for good reason. It is meant to convey humans' tendency to commit violence. It is so just, it is my kind of book. Now, I'm not like a really freaky, sadistic kind of fellow, which is probably what some people might think of me from those Cat in the Hat shorts I've done. But this conveys violence and handles it in a way that feels so deeply real, yet still so deeply monstrous and just dreamlike in some ways. And like this deserves a video of its own. And that video is gonna be my Blood Meridian movie because I love this book so much. I am so fucking tired of them fumbling movie adaptations of it, so I'm doing it myself. That's how much I love the book. And that's saying a lot because this is only number 9. If this was a personal list, obviously this would be number 1, but the other 9 books are better. Number 9, we have the best, this is the best book I own purely from like the quality of its design, the physical volume. This is just fucking beautiful, and it's also one of the longest novels, possibly even the longest book I have ever read, and that is Les Miserables. You've probably heard of this from the musical, and actually was very familiar with the musical since, of course, I am a theater kid before I actually read the book. But I heard about the book, and then I read the abridged version of the book, and I loved it. It was already one of my top 20 of all time, the abridged version. But then I found out that it was the abridged version because I thought that the abridged version was the definitive version of the book. So I did this book justice, and I read the full, like 1,300, 1,400 page version, depends on which translation and print you get. But oh my god, this is heavy. This is hurting my hands. Should I put this down? No, I'm gonna hold it up. Might as well. But this is a heavy book, and it's not flawless. I do think certain parts of it are a bit slow and expository. Not every chapter was necessary. Some parts could definitely drag on, and I don't know. It's not perfect. There's definitely some pacing issues, but what it does right, this has some of the best character work I have ever seen in any novel. All 10 of these books do, but this one in particular displays such an amazing arc for its main character, Jean Valjean. This man who was imprisoned for so many years for fucking bread. Okay, no, he didn't fuck bread. He stole bread, and he was imprisoned for so long. Just kept behind bars, and he was a mess. He was let out finally, under parole, of course. But then he's shown, I'm not going to spoil any of these books, I'm going to keep it a bit vague, but let's just say Jean Valjean is shown an act of mercy, of kindness from someone in this book, and that completely changes his character. And from there, we see such an amazing arc. And then Javert, we also see an amazing redemption arc from him. This man, relentless, wanting to hunt someone down. But was it really worth it? That's all I'm going to say regarding his character. And there's so many other great characters in this book, and the historical aspect of it, it gives us such a staggering portrait of this revolutionary era France. And as a French person myself, I feel just not only devastated by the history of my country, but also just staggered by what Victor Hugo has accomplished. Hugo has always been one of my favorite authors. You know, Hunchback of Notre Dame and the abridged version of Les Mis. But this is his crowning jewel. No doubt. No questions asked. It is a brick. And some parts of it could have been trimmed down, but I think almost all of it is necessary. It is enormous, sprawling, so many characters, but the characters are so well realized, well done, and this is an emotional roller coaster. No book has ever made me cry. Well, There's one that I'll get to in another video, but no book has ever made me cry in a physical sense, but I definitely felt stuff. I felt shit stirring here when I was reading this book, and it is even better than the musical. The musical is amazing, but this is even better, and it's obviously it's better than the movie adaptation of the musical. Holy crap, of course it is. But yeah, it's such a refreshing piece of art to experience after that film. And just when I thought that it wouldn't be as good as the musical, it managed to be better. I mean, I don't think there is more any other book on this list. Well, maybe a few others that is more deserving of this much page count. Like yes, like I've said like 3 times already. Some of it could have been trimmed down, yes, but the parts of it that do feel necessary, the dense stuff, the character work, is all necessary in building these characters and this world around them. This world that is falling apart, but at the same time rebuilding itself. And I couldn't be more happy that I actually found out that this was the real version of the book and not the abridged version. So, yeah. My dumb ass missed out on this book, but thankfully I checked it out, and like this is my favorite physical copy of any book that I own. And this book just gets better the more that I think about it. Like the more and more that I think about it, some of these slower parts and parts of it that I think weren't necessary are starting to feel more necessary, feel more essential. And the more that I think about it, the more that I feel this could rise up in the list. Like I could see this being in the top 5, no doubt. So we'll see when my every novel I've ever read ranked comes out. Yes, I'm still working on that. Okay, enough on Les Miserables. I talked about that for too long. I'm gonna put that down there in my little cubby. Let's see. Number what is this? Number one, two. Number 7. Do I even need to introduce this book? Lord of the fucking Rings. The most iconic book on this list, dare I say. Maybe the most iconic book ever written. What can I say about Lord of the Rings that hasn't been said before? It not only reshaped fantasy, dare I say it created fantasy novels. Yes, there were fantasy works before it, but this is the first true full story. Like, look at this. There were few books of this kind in the fantasy genre that were this long, sprawling, and epic. It took fantasy and turned it from a genre to its entire art form. And we owe everything, all of modern fantasy, and dare I say all of modern media owes everything to this book. But of course, I'm ranking this purely from a quality standpoint, not necessarily the impact it had. But even on its own, this is like a fucking amazing novel. Holy shit. The story, the journey that we go on is intriguing every single step of the way. We really feel the time that passes, the arduous footsteps taken to commit this task, the themes of good and evil, just the thought of such a small creature as a hobbit managing to decide the fate of the entire world is so inspiring. And of course, the characters are iconic as hell. Better than the movies, even, which I love the movies to no end. But the book's even better because it has so much more to it, so many aspects, details. This is one of the most detailed, painstakingly crafted fantasy worlds. No, the most painstakingly crafted fantasy world ever put to literature because it was the first to truly understand its potential, the control you can have, the widespread just the sheer scale of what you can create with fantasy was fully realized by Tolkien, and he went wild, not only with this book, but with every single book he wrote. But this one in particular is just I can't add anything new to the conversation on this book. It's a masterpiece. You know it's a masterpiece. You know it's one of the best books ever written. Some would even say the best. I definitely say that this is probably the most important book ever written, at least the last century or so, I hope. But it's definitely the most important novel to me, and definitely to modern art. And I honestly don't need to say anything because you know Lord of the Rings, you know it's good. And might as well give the other books some time because if I kept rambling on about Lord of the Rings, we would be here for another half an hour. But next up, we have the best Western book ever written and the best American novel of all time. Um, this is possibly the most emotional book I have ever read. It is one that makes you truly feel like you are along the journey with the characters. Dare I say, better than Lord of the Rings, even. You feel like you are a part of the team. The people feel so lifelike. This book can be funny. It can be adventurous, but it can also rip out your heart and stomp it into a paste. Lonesome Dove. This book is about two retired Texas Rangers taking cattle to Montana from the town of Lonesome Dove in Texas, a cross-country trek to Montana. They may not sound like much, and it's not necessarily the journey that makes this book so amazing, it's the characters. Gus is one of the best written characters in any piece of media I have ever seen. He feels so real. And that also goes for all the other characters. The gang. Like, I mean, this is the most endeared I've ever been to a cast of characters in a non-fantasy book, because of course fantasy has some of the most endearing, charming cast of characters, but this one, in a sense, it kind of feels like a journey you'd go in a fantasy novel, but it's real. Parts of it feel so dreamlike, yet so deeply real. And the way it balances charm, wit, and humor with some of the most emotional scenes in any novel I have ever read. Holy shit, this book does not pull any punches. Like, it'll have you laughing. It'll have you bawling. It'll have you longing for this kind of connection. And then, I'm not going to spoil anything, but like, holy crap. The way that this book kind of wraps up, the way it ends, this is probably the closest any book has ever brought me to crying. Dear God, like, the last bit of this book. Like, the entire book is amazing, but that last bit. Dear God. I am not going to say anything on that. It is just, it's amazing, but it's also going to traumatize you in more ways than one, that's for sure. Um, but yeah, Lonesome Dove. Many people have just praised this book to no end. Larry McMurtry is a true American poet, and for my money, alongside Cormac McCarthy, possibly the greatest American author ever. Well, I guess Brandon Sanderson's also up there. Is he American? Actually, I never looked into that. I know, but like, yeah, like Lonesome Dove is a emotional tour de force. If we're ranking these books on emotion, this would be at number one. It is just, and honestly, none of the books on this list are perfect, but this is one that I struggle to think of anything wrong with. And like Les Miserables, it gets better every time I think about it, and it goes up higher. There have even been times where I've considered putting this at the top of the list, but of course the top five are just too good. And speaking of that top five, let's start with big one. And if we're ranking based on plot, I think this has the single best plot, most calculated, well-crafted, and detailed plot to any book I have ever read. The Count of Monte Cristo. Sorry, not Count of Monte Cristo. That sounds like the name of like a lesbian or porn adaptation of this book. But oh, I hope to God, I feel like that's probably floating around on the internet somewhere. But anyways, yeah, more on the book itself. This is one of the most acclaimed and well-known classic books, and for good reason. It is a chunky boy. Like, how many pages? 1,200, 1,300? Nearly 1,300 pages. 1,300 if depending on which print you get. But this is, yeah, Alexandre Dumas is an amazing author. Three Musketeers, I haven't read, but I hear it's good. But this is, I mean, Dumas is a genius. This is the most calculated, well set up plot I have ever seen in any book. Everything plays a role. Every details come back. Everything works in tandem in this novel. It feels cohesive. It feels like one. Like, things come back to bite these characters in the butts later on. There are payoffs, foreshadowing. Everything is paid off. Everything is used to its highest possible potential. And at the center of it all is a sick as hell revenge story that is intriguing every single step of the way. Maybe the middle could get a bit slow, but you know what? It's worth it. Every single step, every single meticulous setup this book makes is paid off beautifully. And Edmond Dantes, just one of the most entertaining characters to follow in any book. You want to see him get revenge. You see, this is not really a spoiler since it happens at the in the opening of the book, but you see everything that he loves. He has an amazing life, and then suddenly it is all suddenly taken away from him, and he's thrown into prison and never told. And he's left there to rot for years upon years. Kind of like an old boy. Maybe this inspired that, actually, the more I think about it. But yeah, his journey in this book, it has such a wide scope. So many characters and side plots, but they all work in tandem. The prison stretch of the book in particular, I thought that would be slow, claustrophobic, and murky, but it is honestly one of the best parts of the book. Like, if you don't like classic literature or not into it, read this book. It's intimidating, but it will have your attention the entire time. This is the kind of book that even people that don't like classic literature will probably at least like, if not love. I wasn't into classic literature, and there's one book that really got me into it, but this is the one that really got me onto a craze, got me hooked on this shit like it's fucking crack. And, like, I mean, this is worth every single page. This is the kind of desert island kind of book where you're like stranded on an island, and you're asked, what if you could bring one book with you, what would it be? This would be a strong contender, though there's another book that I'm eventually going to talk about that might take that honor. Speaking of, next up, we got what was previously the number one book I had ever read. On the top 20, it was number one. And this is still my favorite classic novel of all time. My favorite book in the top 5. I just do think the top next 3 are better and richer in some ways. But this is my beloved Anna Karenina. This is the book that got me into classical literature. It hooked me. The way Tolstoy writes is so intriguing, detailed, and it makes this feel like an entire existence being lived out on these so many pages. Put it simply, this is probably the best depiction of just life I've ever seen in a book. Anna herself feels realistic. She is flawed, and in some parts not likable. And really, the story doesn't sound like much on paper. Anna Karenina gets into an affair, and she gets into a lot of shit. But what it does is it's not as thematically rich as the top 3 books on this list, but it is definitely the best depiction of life, like I've said already. But yeah, Anna, Vronsky, Levin, like, I mean, this is just, the characters feel so real. Levin in particular, I love Levin. Anna herself is also great. And occasionally this book might dip into like political or political lectures every now and then, which is kind of a part of Tolstoy's writing style. And it's well written, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it can slow it down. And then some parts of like the farming in the book, there's some parts with farming, can feel a bit slow. But honestly, if I'm being honest, this is probably the closest to perfection any book on this list has come. So you're probably wondering, okay, if this is the closest to perfection any book on this list has come, why isn't it number one? Well, I do think the top 3, while they don't come to as close to perfection as this book, do have higher peaks, richer themes, and well, I'll get to why later on. But back to Anna Karenina. Yeah, this book, it shows Russian noble life in a way that feels not only realistic, but also shows grief, life and death, love, lack of love, And like from that opening scene where it's literally just describing Stepan's opening morning routine, I was hooked. Tolstoy has a way of taking mundane ass tasks, mundane ass just routines and stuff. He takes stuff that is mundane and he makes it some of the most intriguing stuff you will ever read. Like, written in the hands of any other writer, this would feel slow. But with Tolstoy, it feels like every single second of this book, every word is utilized to the best of its advantage. And that is just, I mean, that's Tolstoy for you. He is my favorite author to ever live. Well, either him, Tolstoy, or either Tolstoy, Tolkien, or Dostoevsky, but that's kind of a topic for another video. But yeah, Tolstoy is possibly my favorite classic author. And this is my favorite book of his and a top 3 book of all time. And the more I think about it, honestly, it might honestly overtake Blood Meridian and Lord of the Rings. This is like, I mean, there's a reason why this was the number 1 book of all time for so long. And this is only number 4. The next 3 are even better. Let's finally get into the top 3. And there are 2 new additions to this list that managed to overtake Anna Karenina and one other book that I think kinda got better than it over time. And that book is one that a lot of people consider the best book ever written. The Brothers Karamazov. Dostoevsky is considered by many to be the greatest author of all time. And while Tolstoy is my personal favorite, I do think Dostoevsky is the greatest to ever live. He made so many masterpieces that really almost had a chance, almost had a crack at this list. But that's how tight the competition is. Even some of his best works are like top 20 books of all time for me, and they got pushed back by some of the books on this list. Crime and Punishment is your perfect entry point to his books. The Idiot is a very relatable book for some people because of the character of Lev Mishkin. Demons is probably his most layered and politically complex book, but worth it because it is absolutely outstanding. And this is the culmination of everything he has ever done. His entire life was leading up to this book, and it paid off gloriously. It follows the titular Brothers Karamazov, and though at first it starts out just their normal lives, we get to learn about the brothers Ivan, Alyosha, and whatnot, and they are intriguing. They are depicted in a way that makes them feel real. Like Tolstoy, Dostoevsky makes these characters feel realistic and flawed. Ivan, in particular, is possibly the best written character I have ever seen in classic literature, or at least one of, a contender for sure. And his dynamic with Alyosha is possibly one of the best aspects of this book. And then when the father's murder comes in, and the moral complexities and themes and philosophies that we get introduced to are some of the most thought-provoking I've ever read, if not the most thought-provoking I've ever read in a book. It has themes on morality, on religion. Speaking on religion, the Grand Inquisitor chapter is possibly the best chapter I've ever read in any book. And this book is worth it entirely just for that chapter alone. But yeah, this is probably the best thematic book I've ever read. The best handling of themes that is displayed so well through its characters and what they're going through. Ivan, his internal struggles, the dynamics of the brothers, the moral complexities, the moral grays. This is like, I really did consider having this ranked even higher on the list. But the other 2 did kind of top it. But any other day of the week, this could top those, because in terms of theme, this is the best book on the list. But, like, nobody wrote quite like Dostoevsky. Some would call his ideas dangerous. I say they're revolutionary to literature. I could not stop thinking about this book after I read it. And I cannot recommend it enough. Again, Like something like Anna Kay or Count of Monte Cristo, even if you don't like classic literature, I feel like this book could definitely hook you. Though maybe not in the same degree as something like Count of Monte Cristo, but that's a topic for another video. Give me a second. Oh boy, I just got my royalties for my books. That is very nice, very good, very nice. And next up, we have number 2, which was a book that actually held the number 1 spot the moment I finished reading it. It is by far the longest book I've ever read. Well, this print at least is 1,400 pages. War and Peace. Tolstoy Strikes Again, because I fucking love him, and I severely underestimated this book. Like, I had such high standards and expectations, and after I read Anna Karenina, it became the new standard for all books I had ever read. And I was afraid that this book wouldn't live up to it, because I thought due to its larger scope, it wouldn't be able to focus on the characters quite as thoroughly as Anna Karenina did, since it had a smaller scope. Boy, was I wrong, because this is better than Anna Karenina. Not as close to perfection. Parts of it are slow. Some political analysis, essays, and stuff in this book aren't quite subtle. But the peaks of this book, the scale, the ambition, the way it manages to take so many moving threads, the families, Pierre, all these characters, the battlefront, and the normal lives affected by this war. It truly feels like an epic unlike anything ever written. And I am so stupid for underestimating this book. It is considered by many to be the greatest book of all time for a reason. And I was entirely on that hype train when I finished reading this. This is probably my desert island book. If I had to bring one book to a desert island, and it could be my only source of entertainment, it would be this one. There are so many characters. Pierre, in particular, another contender for one of the best written characters in classic literature. But like every character feels well developed and fully realized in spite of this enormous and sprawling scope of the book. And in spite of its large scale, it still manages to shrink down to a more detailed and lifelike mundane level for these characters. Like even with the battlefront, we get to see that war isn't a spectacle. It is messy. It is disgusting. It is consequential. And like the way it is all handled, it truly feels like Tolstoy put everything he could into this book over the 6 years he used to write it. And like I know Tolstoy himself didn't consider this a book, but at the same time, I mean, I didn't consider it a novel. Sorry. At the same time, I mean, it's a story. It has characters, and they're all done staggeringly well. Like Tolstoy needed to give more credit to this book. Like this is a novel. This is the novel. And to be honest, I'm still kind of thinking of maybe putting this above my current number 1, though that book definitely has a lot of stuff going for it as well. But this has everything. A sprawling, well developed, well crafted, and staggeringly well paced plot. Like, I thought this book would take me forever to finish. I finished it in 23 days, a little over 3 weeks, and I just flew through all of it. If I could recommend one book, one classic book to anyone, this is it. This is the one classic novel that no reader should ever miss out on. It's not for everyone, but for those who get into it, it is so much. It is everything. But there's one book that tops it. And if you've seen a recent video of mine, you know that book. Before I reveal it, I wanted to bring something up. All of these books are so well acclaimed, not necessarily for all of the parts being amazing, but there's a certain quality all these books have that put them above the rest. Brothers Karamazov, theme, ideas, philosophies, the themes that it introduces are some of the most thought-provoking ever put to page. Count of Monte Cristo, a calculated and intriguing plot where every detail is put to use. Lonesome Dove, emotion and just emotional tour de force and characters that you feel like you are going on this journey with. Les Mis and War and Peace, historical scale that still manages to deal with characters in a way that feels fully developed. Anna Karenina, portraying the mundane in a way that feels intriguing. All of these books have certain singular qualities that stand above all their others. And what if I told you there was a book that had all of it? The historical scale and relevance of War and Peace and Les Miserables, the calculated, detailed, and fully realized and cohesive plot of Count of Monte Cristo, the emotions of Lonesome Dove, the mundane, intriguing, and slow lifestyle approach similar to Anna Karenina. What if I told you there was a novel that had all of that and managed to do it even better? It has some of the most intriguing themes, dare I say, on the same level as Brothers Karamazov. Themes of war, themes of violence. A book that was so controversial and dangerous for its time that it got banned and didn't see the light of day until 20 years after it was finished. If you've seen a video that I did a bit back, you know that that book is Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. Funnily enough, it shares kind of a similar naming structure to War and Peace. And also, like War and Peace, people call this the Soviet equivalent of War and Peace, in the sense that it's kind of structured the same as War and Peace. It's showing such a large-scale battle, mainly with Stalingrad, yet it still manages to shrink down to a intellectual and character level. But I'm here to tell you that this is more than just Soviet War and Peace. And, like, I was staggered by this book. I didn't know that what I had read. I didn't know books could get this good. Well, I did, but then this book managed to stand above all the greats that I held in such high regard. Because it has everything. There is not one single aspect of this book that stands above the rest to make it great. Every aspect of it, the themes, the characters, the pacing, the scale, the writing, everything, every aspect of it. There's not one single aspect of it that isn't phenomenal. I didn't know a book could operate on this capacity. With a book this long, I know that there was probably going to be at least one aspect of it that wasn't quite as good as the rest. I was wrong. This book is paced impeccably. The characters, the story, the plot is detailed. It is calculated. There is betrayal. There is love. There is death. This is one of the most raw depictions of war I have ever seen. And I'm so happy that it was able to reach the light of day. And honestly, I'm going to be really vague with this. I'm not even going to say too much on it because you should read this yourself. Even if you're not into classic books, this doesn't technically count as a classic book. It was written in the 50s and 60s, and then wasn't published till the 80s. But it really feels timeless. Like it doesn't belong to the classic era of literature, nor the mid to modern era, nor the modern era. This feels like something. Like, yeah, it's a product of his time, for sure. But Vasily Grossman writes about Stalingrad so honestly, so critically, and through these characters, through this war, through the horrific events that they go through, he crafts one of the most intriguing, thought-provoking, and, dare I say, flawless stories I have ever seen in literature. Like I said, Anna Karenina might be the closest to perfection, but this also kind of stands up there. I don't have a single bad thing to say about this book. Maybe parts of it are slow, but I don't care. I said no book ever made me cry. This was hard not to cry to. I didn't, but I came close. And like I said, if there was one classic book I could recommend on this list, it would be War and Peace. But if there was one book, if you had to walk away from this list reading one book, only one book that's on here, Life and Fate, it will change you. It will change your life. Sure did mine. That is the updated top 10 novels of all time as of late August 2026. Um, my every novel of all time ranked is coming up soon. Well, not soon. I'm still on the early phases of writing and animating that. But that stuff could change. Who knows? War and Peace could be at number one. Maybe Brothers K could climb number one. Maybe Anna Karenina could reclaim its spot. Maybe Life and Fate will stay there. Maybe another book might actually claim that spot. Speaking of, I'm gonna do this in a different video, but uh, there is one other book that I read. I just finished reading a few days ago, and I need to think on this book because it might actually be a top 10 of all time after having read it. I'm not gonna reveal which one, but just know you're probably gonna see it on the video. But for the time being, thank you for dropping in on our most recent literature book talk. And another announcement I'd like to make, I'm going to be starting a series called TBR Tuesdays, where every Tuesday I put out a short little video where I talk about and recommend a book. This could be fantasy, this could be classic, it could be modern, who knows. And yeah, thank you for watching. Check out some of these books. Read Life and Fate. That is the reason I made this video. I want you to read Life and Fate. I don't care if you don't like classic books. It is not classic. It is art.